So, so thinking ahead to the gradual process where, at the moment, some people may have returned to offices, some people are still remote working, may do so indefinitely. Ireland is now kind of saying, maybe let's go back, and anyone who can work from home, continue to do so. So there's a bit of uncertainty and change again, as usual, I suppose, for this year. So I wanted to just discuss this because I'm quite curious about it. Why are some people thriving in that remote working environment and other people are maybe desperate to get back to the office? And of course, we all have different circumstances at play. Some of us maybe don't have good Wi-Fi connection, maybe we don't have a quiet space that we can work in. Obviously, maybe people are juggling home demands. So obviously there's so many other external factors, but I wanted to look at the individual differences and how that will have an impact, because we naturally do all have different approaches to change, different levels of resilience, different levels of ability to cope with uncertainty, and differences in our desires for socializing. There's been kind of jokes and memes going around, things like this, what the different reactions are to working from home. But I suppose it just kind of makes you think of, how different personality traits might impact our experiences. For anyone who doesn't know me, my name is Julie. I'm a business psychologist with Kinch Lyons. And part of my role involves working with different personality assessments and frameworks for selection and development. So I'm quite interested in that, and interested in how to apply that knowledge to the world of work and the world around us that's happening at the moment. As a little warm-up, I just want to kick off with asking you guys a question, to pop something into the chat. Have a little think, what is working well for you at the moment? So I wanted to just ask this question, pop your answers into the chat, anything you can think of. It's good when, in the context of uncertainty and change, it's good to ask you guys, or for you to ask your clients, what is working well, just to make sure we're noticing progress. Again, with so much change going on, it can be good to notice what we can do to keep that success going. Aoife's on holidays, so that's good. Yeah, exactly. That is definitely something that's probably working well. Niamh saying no commute, better work-life balance. Yeah, absolutely. Less time spent in the car, no commute, some more personal time. Great opportunity to live the work-life balance. Extra time for research. Yeah, brilliant. So we've got a few different things coming in. People feeling in a lot of ways they might have more time, or they're balancing things a bit better. Yeah, manage yourself better. Jenny is only back from mat leave, 9 weeks. Sorry, the chat is moving on me. So still adjusting, but enjoying the lack of commute. Yeah, so I'd say it's probably a pretty challenging time, Jenny, to come back to all of this, but yeah, plenty to adjust to. Eve is finding it's easier to work with clients over Zoom, no travel. Yeah, and time to work on her dissertation, which we will be talking about a little bit later on. Walty is saying, I've been able to exercise more, especially with my husband, which is brilliant. Time to breathe. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, lots of really good things coming in. Less road rage. Yeah, fair. And there's fewer people on the road, so even if you do have to drive, I think it's a bit calmer. Needs to be closer to nature. I've actually felt that myself as well, kind of a desire to just get out in a nice green space. Tend to do more quality work. Better to be back to the office now, but enjoying not having to travel. Zoom is great. Learn about myself more. Okay, so brilliant. There's loads of really positive things that are working well for everyone at the moment. So I think it's good to just remind ourselves of that progress and those things that are working well, figuring out, okay, why does that work for me? Okay, so I just wanted to get you thinking a little bit about your own experience. So for some, and like we mentioned, there's definitely some benefits. For some people, working from home or remote working has greatly improved their work-life balance, and they might have more leisure time spent with their family, more time to exercise. Some of it been able to match or increase their levels of productivity compared to the office, which in turn, if they're working with an organization, it might make them more likely to stay with that organization. But obviously for others, remote working can bring negative consequences, isolation, lack of engagement, and a drop in productivity. So again, if they're working with an organization, that can have an impact on the company. So as I mentioned, of course, there are many external factors that relate to the working from home environment that we were thrown into in this context. We didn't have, like a lot of us, if we needed childcare, we didn't have the option for that. We didn't have the option to maybe phase work from home and try it out and see if it works. For some people, it was very much straight into it. But as we begin to see the kind of possibility of restrictions lifting, maybe in the future, things gradually beginning to change, I think it's worth considering how we can make it work for us. So if the external working from home environment was perfectly set up, are there any internal barriers to overcome? So it's worth looking at, what internal factors are at play, because, we can't control or predict much of what is going on in the world right now, or what is to come in, the next months or years. But what is quite stable is our personalities. And so we might have more luck trying to understand and manage that rather than trying to, control and manage everything that's going on around us. So I wanted to introduce a model, just the 5-factor model of personality. Some people would be quite familiar with it, for others maybe not so much. So I just wanted to kind of go through that, and then we can have a little bit of a discussion shortly. So the 5-factor model, it's like the primary colors of personality. There are a lot of other personality models and assessments, and they can often stem from these. But you can remember the 5 factors by the acronym OCEAN, which is why I have a picture of the ocean there. So OCEAN, you got openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. But that is now sometimes called, emotional stability or emotionality, because I suppose neuroticism now has kind of negative connotations with it. But I'm just going to pop it in there because the acronym is convenient. So you can be, on different ends of these scales of personality traits. So I'll just run through these quickly, and then we can have a little discussion about them. So openness to experience. This is the degree to which a person needs intellectual stimulation. So it's the degree to which people like change or new and unusual ideas and variety. So with all of these, you could be high on this or low on this or somewhere in the middle, if you think of kind of a continuum. So high scorers, people who are very high in openness to experience as that trait, they would be quite curious and receptive to new ideas, imaginative, and they'd be seeking different experiences. The next one there is conscientiousness. And that is the degree to which a person shows self-discipline, is organized and systematic, and acts dutifully. So someone who scores highly on that would be quite, cautious and careful and organized. They'd probably be quite willing to comply with rules or norms or standards. So that is conscientiousness. The third one then is extroversion. And that's the degree to which a person gets their energy from the external world, the degree to which they seek stimulation and social interaction. So if someone is quite high scoring on this, then they tend to be quite sociable, energetic, ambitious, and excitement seeking. Obviously the lower end would be more introverted, get their energy from their internal world. Agreeableness is the fourth one there, which is the degree to which a person needs or wants pleasant, harmonious interactions with others, or relations with others. So if you score highly on that, you are probably quite friendly and empathetic, quite harmonious, cooperative. So someone who scores low on that would maybe be more antagonistic or willing to challenge others and engage in debate or maybe conflict. And then the fifth one is neuroticism, or it's also called emotional stability. So obviously being high on neuroticism or low on emotional stability. So they're kind of the opposite there. But if this neuroticism, it's basically the degree to which a person easily experiences unpleasant emotions. So like anger or sadness or anxiety. So again, it's also known as emotionality. So if you were higher on emotionality, you'd experience those emotions. So people who score highly on that would be more sensitive, more emotional. They may be more likely to take things personally or be self-critical. Whereas people who are lower on neuroticism or high on emotional stability would be quite calm and composed and resilient. Okay. So any questions on any of those so far? Okay. Okay, perfect. So I want to just break you into different groups and get you to have a little chat. So I want two different questions. So the first one would be, again, kind of looking more at the remote working. What kind of traits might help or hinder remote working? And the second question then, how might they influence that return to work? So picturing, the environment where COVID is still a thing, we still need to be managing all the health and safety regulations and keeping people, keeping their distance and keeping, all the kind of precautions that we're supposed to be taking. How might those different traits react to those regulations, or how might we manage those best? Okay, so I'll give you about 12 or 13 minutes and just have a little discussion on that. So any questions before I break you into groups? Okay, perfect. So let's see, we go to breakout rooms. Okay, welcome back everybody. I can't wait to hear all of your brilliant chats. What I was thinking of doing is something that I have never done before, so bear with me, but use the whiteboard function on Zoom. So if anyone was wondering about this function and maybe has or hasn't used it before, I can be your guinea pig because I've never used it before. So just so we can maybe capture what you were discussing. So let's see, I'm going to make so many spelling mistakes. Traits. Okay. So who wants to go first? What kind of traits do you think would be really helpful to have when you're remote working, and why?
Conscientiousness is a good trait to have when you're working remotely, because back to being organized.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Conscientiousness. So you're kind of organized in your work setup and everything like that.
Really, just on that point as well, in our group we were talking about kind of managers and people managers being high on the conscientiousness scale at the moment, because I think Marie was mentioning that the high rate of probably mental health issues that are going on at the moment, and that there's a very, very much variation in how managers are engaging with their teams. And is it that the organization needs to prioritize training for managers in that space, but they also need support from the higher ups in the organization as well, to take care of kind of people's well-being. You can't pick up the subtle cues you get in the office.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so kind of needs to be a bit more systematic than just picking up on something in the office, that kind of thing.
Because I don't think, well, in my organization, work from home isn't going away anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly. Brilliant. Thank you for that. Anyone else, any other traits that they think would be helpful or like that?
We were saying the openness to experience, because we were saying that it's sort of perhaps affords more time to dig into things, to research, to understand a little bit more. because there might be a little bit more downtime, or I suppose more hours in the day if you're not commuting as much and things like that. So that kind of can facilitate greater learning.
Yeah, brilliant. Perfect, thank you. Anyone else on either of those or any other traits on conscientious openness experience?
Sorry, just on openness experience, there's quite a lot of data that people who are more open to experience are easier trained and are better managers as well. So if you were putting in something like a remote working training program, which quite a lot of companies don't seem to have done, openness experience is also better for management as well. And I'll link into the next one is emotional stability in neuroticism. I actually just completed a dissertation on the 5 personality traits and remote working preference, and emotional stability showed a significant result for predicting remote working preference towards people who didn't want to work remotely, quite surprisingly. And when I looked down further into it, it seems that emotional stability has a neurological link with loneliness.
Okay.
And not, which I originally assumed was introversion, extroversion. So it appears that people who would get lonely, low in emotional stability, actually don't prefer to work from home.
Okay. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I know it's great to have your recent research there. So it predicts loneliness, is it, or it has that neurological link to it? And basically it's kind of key, or it's kind of key to success in terms of that. Okay, brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah, that is great to know. It's good to have the research there. What about, are there any, oh yeah, go ahead.
Mind on something there for a moment, please, Julie. Just the meme you showed of Elsa and Anna there, you know, the experts are loving it at the moment. Something that I discussed in the group was perhaps, though, introverts will be less likely to reach out in this remote environment and get more lonely, and like, you know, whereas if they're in the office environment, they will be more pushed outside that comfort zone.
Yeah.
You know, so might that be a hindrance? But then it was also kind of discussed, it also depends on the context of your work. If it's very team engaged kind of work, you probably need that more contact, but if it's a bit more isolated, you mightn't.
Yeah, I get what you mean. So yeah, with the introversion, it's, so you're saying might not reach out to others and make the effort to get that connection. But then I suppose the other side,
we all need a bit of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I just
but then
add a point to what Jenny said there, if that's okay. So I looked into introversion as well, and it turns out there's quite a lot, and it's not my own, neurological evidence on overstimulation of introverts in open office environments, and that it's actually can cause mental health issues as well. So that's something you maybe take into account. But I think, as Jenny said, it's dependent on the type of employment you're in, the type of office environment you're in as well. So that's quite recent research as well, neurological research on overstimulation of introverts. I openly admit I'm quite highly introverted, and I've spent a lot of my life being stigmatized as in, you just walk off, but it turns out there's a neurological excuse.
That's why you did the research.
Yes, partly. And I'm highly conscientious as well, so I have to fly that
flag. Brilliant.
Just to build on what Graham is saying there, though, it's interesting because I think I would be defined as being an extrovert, right? So on the scale, that's where I would come in. And yet, for me, this time of remote working has been hugely enjoyable. So I think there's my only concern would be that we classify people and have an expectation of how they may be when, you know, this is a new phenomenon for everybody. I think going into this, I wouldn't have thought that I would have enjoyed the remote working quite as much as I do, because I am an extrovert and I do get a buzz of energy from people around me, and yet I found it hugely enjoyable. Very I mean, it's been stressful at times, don't get me wrong, because people sort of forget that you actually have other stuff going on and they keep reaching out or whatever, but ultimately the downtime and the focus time has been quite surprisingly enjoyable. So I think it's all I'd say is just let's be careful that we don't sort of perceive extroverts as being ones who completely miss that that connectedness, because actually technology has been just as connected as sometimes being in person. And I suppose what I've seen is when I've been coaching people, which is separate to my day job, the relationship over technology has been even more compelling and stronger because you really are single-mindedly focused on somebody. So technology and remote working hasn't necessarily been a barrier to achieving extroversion, stimulus, shall we say. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, absolutely. And you're dead right. Like there's not, sometimes we do kind of go, oh, that person's an introvert or an extrovert and they're in their little boxes and that's who they are. But realistically, like we all have so much more to our personalities. So yeah, I know plenty of introverts or extroverts who are kind of thriving in this. And actually I've seen some kind of surprising studies, which I'll show in a little bit, about extroversion and that kind of remote working, which sort of supports what Nisa was saying. Any traits then that came up when we were talking about traits that might hinder your performance or be kind of a barrier to remote working? I suppose we mentioned high neuroticism because they're more kind of worrisome, or they're more worried about things, or maybe dealing with that uncertainty, and we mentioned about being lonely. So yeah, any other traits that might come in there?
I'm not sure how best to which bucket it goes into, but we were talking about the benefit of remote working in a way to avoid office politics, or that kind of sort of that infection that if somebody is in bad form or whatever, and how it can drag people down, or you get caught up in a spiral of conversation that maybe isn't the most constructive. Whereas when you're remote working, you're less likely to have a moan to the person beside you. You deal with that yourself and you move on, and that's been a good thing. But I don't know exactly how you classify it in either of your buckets here.
I suppose, I don't know if they're necessarily traits, but I totally get what you mean.
It's the agreeableness piece of it, that you're sort of, I suppose, that you're more prone to being more agreeable, more pleasant, harmonious, because you don't have a vehicle to be anything else, shall we say.
Yeah, I get what you mean. Let's think, where would we put that? So I suppose in a way agreeableness kind of benefits from remote working, because they're not maybe trying to fix the office politics, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's less of a forum to be anything other than, I mean, if you're engaging with your colleagues for an hour on Zoom or whatever forum, you're not going to spend the time giving out, because it's unprofessional as well as everything else. So you're not going to do that. So I suppose it forces you almost to be more agreeable.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
So, yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah. And what about then returning to work? Any traits that you think might influence that phasing back into work, for some people who are doing so?
I would say openness to experience, and people are more adaptable to change.
Yeah, brilliant.
And then obviously high neuroticism is not good, but that's been shown to not be a desirable trait, I think, in any job role. Do a little bit of research on that.
Yeah, I get what you mean. One thing though I was thinking about neuroticism, they could probably be, if someone's high in that, they could be maybe good kind of compliance officers, because maybe they're more threat sensitive, they're more kind of aware of, the potential threats. Whereas if you have someone who's very emotionally stable, very calm and resilient, they might be kind of going, yeah, sure, we're fine, we're grand, everybody come back into the office, it's cool. Whereas maybe the person who's higher on neuroticism might say, well, here are the systems we need to put in place. Now, that's just my own speculation. I haven't seen any research on that, but just a thought, because they are more maybe able to kind of scan the horizon for threats potentially. So could be have upsides and downsides. Any other traits do you think?
I think organizations should assume high neuroticism for their plans going back, and to cover all their employees, and to make those who are mightn't be as vigilant, like you said, maybe on the scale more stable, but they be a bit more lax, to make sure that they adhere to the very serious, guidelines that we have to follow at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, brilliant. So will I keep going on, or does anyone have any more questions or comments? Okay, what I can do is I could just save that and I can share it with everyone afterwards on the LinkedIn group. I'll stop sharing for a minute and just bring up a couple of slides that I have here. Okay, so with openness to experience. So I'll show you a bit of research and then I will tell you where I got this from. If people can hang on until 11, that'll be brilliant. But if you have to drop off now, I totally understand. But before you do, I will just make you aware of something. So I probably have mentioned it before, the personality assessment called the Risk Type Compass. And I really like it. It's just really interesting, and even especially now. So it's an assessment that extracts the risk-related themes in personality. So it really captures how people feel about change and uncertainty. And, again, it's based around the 5-factor model, but it's just kind of extracting the risk-related themes. And what I am happy that I can offer is a complimentary report, so just a 1-page version. And so usually the report costs £35, or about €45 roughly with VAT and everything. But it's something that I can offer to you guys to take. So what I'll do is basically I'll send out an email, just make people aware of it, and then people can email me back if they're interested in taking this assessment. Because as I said, it's really, I think, just so interesting at the moment in terms of how we're managing all this change and uncertainty and risk. So drop me an email after this and I can pop your name on a list. So I just have a certain amount that I can give out. So it's kind of first come, first served. So you can drop me an email at julie@kinshines.ie. But I just wanted to make you aware of that. I can talk a little bit more about it later. But that the research that's gone into that has that's where I've got a bit of this research that I've just popped on a slide here. So I just wanted to kind of bring you through this, a few of the things that they found. So with openness to experience, a couple of studies have found, and obviously these are all pre-COVID, so not as up to date. We know things may have changed, but what they found was that people who were high in openness to experience were quite tolerant of uncertainty and change. So that could be beneficial in terms of dealing with that uncertainty. But they also seek out new experiences and seek out risk. And then actually some more recent research has just found that employees who are more imaginative suffered higher levels of loneliness while remote working, because they were, I suppose, maybe feeling a bit confined. So they're looking for that imaginativeness, that new experiences, and they weren't getting them. But again, on the other hand, that being tolerant of uncertainty and change might mean that they can kind of adapt well, whether they're back in an office or working from home. So yeah, they're people who probably will welcome opportunities to go outside of their usual environment. So the idea of maybe doing the same thing in the same place every day might not really be their cup of tea. Conscientiousness then. So as I said, they're organized and careful. They prefer conformity and control. Tend to be less tolerant of uncertainty and change. Again, this is more on the extreme high scores, are a bit less comfortable with change. And so that compliance with health and safety measures, if we have clear rules, might be easier for conscientious people. So again, thinking of that return to work, that might be easier for them. Whereas being less tolerant of uncertainty and change might kind of hold them back in certain areas. I'm just kind of flying through these, and I'll send on the slides afterwards. But extroversion, then, I think this was the one that I was quite interested in, because, as you know, we think of extroverts as being outgoing, and they probably, you know, need a lot of stimulation and social interaction, which for a while we really weren't getting in the same way that we did before. You know, it's been found that they need that external stimulation. And actually, in terms of high risk situations, they found that they appraise them as less risky. So again, it might have been a case of going, okay, well, you know, this isn't too bad, it's fine, we'll be able to manage this. But again, remember for example, the opposite of the kind of compliance officer looking for the threat. So this might be one that could maybe hold us back in terms of our, you know, return to work and seeing risky situations. But this recent research that I saw as well on remote working was saying that assertiveness and sociability, which are kind of sub-themes within extroversion, they were actually positively related to employee engagement, and that was even for remote workers. So that was the one that kind of surprised me, or I was interested in, and the, I suppose, reasoning they gave for it was that maybe people who are scoring high on those are more achievement oriented and energetic. So maybe it was a case that they were, you know, still going for that achievement, remaining engaged, even if they're working from home. So that was one that I was a bit surprised about in terms of the results. And then I just wanted to touch on the neuroticism and emotional stability one. So they tend to be less resilient, and they tend to interpret ambiguous stimuli as more threatening. So if there's something that's vague or they're uncertain about, they might focus more on threats. So that recent study I mentioned, people who were lower on the self-esteem and composure elements within emotional stability were experiencing more worry, more anxiety, and more loneliness in the remote working environment. So that's kind of what you were saying, Graham, as well, is that being prone to loneliness. So they may be more fearful about the return to work, about the uncertainty, and about the change. I haven't actually mentioned really agreeableness because I didn't see too much research in relation to that. Yeah, Graham, you're shaking your head as well. Yeah, there's not really doesn't seem to be a strong link necessarily. Like, it may have some impact, but I'm not too sure yet. So another, as I said, the possible positive of people who are high on neuroticism, they might make more effort to protect themselves and others. So that could be a huge asset in the context of us returning to work. Again, that compliance officer, or the person who makes sure that we have the hand sanitizer, we have the PPE, whatever you need. Okay, so that's just, you know, flying through a couple of a bit of research just to kind of back up what you guys were discussing. I wanted to just touch on these psychometric assessments just because they're quite timely. They're assessments that help individuals, so we would use these with our clients, and they just help individuals to understand how to approach risk, uncertainty, and change. So I just thought I'd mention them just in case any of you are, you know, looking to maybe add a tool to your toolkit, or if you have clients that you're helping to coach or train them in terms of knowing themselves better and how they manage stress and change, their natural approaches to uncertainty and risk. I thought I'd just highlight these because they're quite key self-assessments, and they're all available if you did want to become certified to use them. They're all available through self-paced online certifications. So very suiting the environment that we're all in at the moment, where I think a lot of people are working quite flexibly, you know, working from home. So they are just ones that I thought I'd mention. So you've got the hardiness resilience gauge, which is all about, you know, managing, like, controlling your environment and what you can control, and being not afraid of change. And the change style indicator gives an insight into your approach to change. Again, do you prefer very incremental change or very fast paced and regular change? And then the risk type compass, which is the one that I just mentioned, that I think is really interesting, and I'm really glad that I have the opportunity to give you a free one-page report so you can find out your own risk type. As I said, it's based on the 5-factor model, and it's all about how we think and feel about risk and decision making. So I'll compile that list after I get your email addresses, and I'll be sending an email out. I wanted to mention this book as well. So full disclosure, I haven't actually read it myself, but it was recommended to me by the expert on risk personality, the CEO of the company that make the Risk Type Compass. And this basically discusses the probabilistic analysis. It doesn't really help us, you know, those mathematical, you know, focusing on statistical models only really help us in some specific circumstances. But if we're trying to, you know, create these probabilities where there's no real way to make a probability, then it's kind of saying what's the point in that, because it can give us sort of a false sense of security. The Financial Times actually called it an eloquent, highbrow, entertaining and enlightening rant. So basically a rant against the faux precision of mathematical models. And it's kind of saying maybe let's turn our attention, like I said at the start, let's turn our attention back to just great decision making. How do we make decisions as well as we possibly can? Rather than trying to predict an unknowable future, we can kind of turn the attention inwards a little bit. Okay, so that basically is what I have to say on this, but I'd love to, even if we wanted to continue the conversation on the LinkedIn page, I'll share all of your insights that we recorded, and just wanted to give you then an insight into an idea of what we are covering in September. So on the 16th of September, we'll be back with the Dirty Side Club. Aoife O'Brien is hosting on, you know, basically exploring how we can use values congruence and need satisfaction to drive job satisfaction. So that'll help us, you know, retain our clients or help our clients retain the right people. So she'll walk us through psychological needs and how they relate to our values, and how we get that right fit in the work environment. So she completed her dissertation on this topic for her MSc in organizational behavior. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. But that is basically it from me. I will hang around for another couple of minutes if anyone wants to continue having a chat. But thanks so much for joining me, and I hope to see you on the 16th of September. Thanks.
Thanks, Julie. Bye.
Thank you. See you.